This is what a real farmhouse or homestead kitchen looks like, at least if you're a homesteader and farmer like I am. I think there's a big myth that you're gonna get organized once. So raise your hand with me if you've done a huge organization time where you have purged and you have decluttered and you have organized everything. And for this brief moment in time, your house looks Pinterest picture worthy, what you're gonna show on your Instagram story. And then maybe it's a couple days, maybe it's a couple weeks, maybe it's a couple months, but you find yourself like, it didn't stay that way. Like, what is wrong with me? I am constantly having to come back and reorganize stuff in order to keep it in that manner. And the truth is, for most working kitchens, especially a homestead, or if you're doing a lot of from scratch cooking, is not going to stay picture perfect. And that means it's being used and that's okay. But the other truth is, a lot of us, myself included, you end up needing to do things differently as you grow in certain areas. So what has been efficient for you at one point in time, or might have worked organizational for you in one point in time, a couple years later, it's going to look vastly different, or you just need to redo things because the way that you do things and the way that you cook or the way that your kitchen is managed has changed. And that's totally okay. So I'm going to give you a little bit of case in point. So one, you are looking at my cupboards in all of their glory. Now, last year, I actually redid this cooking spice seasoning area of our cupboard. One, I like it having here. It does get a little bit of heat from the stove, but not very much because it's not directly over it. But obviously when I'm cooking and making, sauces and dishes and every different thing, I want to be able to just reach really easy if I need a pinch or a seasoning of that, and I can do that. However, I got these, which I do really like, these pull-outs in order to be able to go two up. Up here, I put the stuff that I don't use nearly as often, or quite honestly, you'll see some things in there that are seasonings that my son and husband like to use that I don't so much, but that's fine. So these are things that I don't access nearly as often, and they're just on this stationary little shelf here that allows you to still go 2 levels deep. But I really like these because I can put a lot more in here and it's just more accessible, and I can still put some of my larger jars. So I have my larger jar of cumin here and it fits on here along with some of my smaller things like of salt, paprika, and chili powder, which you will notice some of these spices we are growing of the herbs and I put in here myself, but the majority are going to be if it's actual spices and herbs that I'm not growing myself. We do get from Azure Standard, who has sponsored this video. And you can get them in some of the smaller things. So the smoked paprika, I don't usually use a ton of in large, huge quantities. So I do get it like in this little glass shaker. But things like cumin and chili powder, which is hiding back here. And this jar, I put in the mason jars. So I buy in bulk from Azure Standard the spices and seasonings that we use a lot larger amounts of, and then I just transfer them into these jars, which do fit in here. So that was something that we did last year, and it's actually worked really well and stayed pretty much the same throughout this year. I have a few where I didn't get these transferred yet. This one is from Azure Standard, and I love, this is their popcorn seasoning, the nacho cheese. I really, really like this on popcorn. And so I got the bag and made popcorn and was in too big of a hurry to bother putting it into, I have a little shaker jar that I put it in, see, popcorn seasoning. But I was in too big of a hurry, so I just slit the bag and took a spoon and sprinkled it on top. I will be actually putting it back in my shaker jar because it's easier to do that, but haven't done it yet. So there you see my work in progress. But this has worked really well. It's been this way for a year and it stayed pretty much the same for me. However, this section, I pretty much am only using in this cupboard. I'm using my flour, my sugar, my coconut oil. I've got some powdered sugar, baking powder, cocoa powder. This is brown sugar, chocolate chips, and then my homemade vanilla extract. But you see a lot of other bags and whatnot things in there in jars. And honestly, I'm not using probably about that back half, at least not on a consistent basis. So this is something where I know this is really not efficient use of this space that's right here, kind of prime real estate as far as ingredients goes. So, and part of that has just been a change in cooking. I've got some jars back there that have like psyllium husk in them and some different things when I was doing gluten-free. I use those items a lot more. Now that I'm not gluten-free, we've done some different gut healing and I'm primarily just doing sourdough. I just find I'm not using those ingredients nearly as much, so I need to get them out and make more efficient use of this. So right now it's still functioning, not super efficient. But a lot of things that I like to think about when I'm looking at the kitchen is definitely the flow of things. So here I've got this crock. They're not all pretty, but this is the utensils that I'm using almost all the time when I'm cooking. And a lot of times when I'm cooking, I need to be able to just grab them. And some of them would be really hard to fit in the drawer and get them closed just because of the size. And so here we just keep those. I've got my salt cellar, and then I've got my little toothpicks to check when things are done baking wise, if they're finished in the middle. And so really just thinking about flow, like in here, this is our knife block. So this is magnetized. So the knives will hook on this. And we used to have our knives on the opposite side of the kitchen. But I found a lot of times I would be working here and most of the things that I was chopping up would be transferred to the stove or the oven. And so we moved the knives over here, and that's been a lot more efficient, but it was kind of funny because we kept the knives on the other side of the kitchen for years. So sometimes it's just thinking about like being very cognizant when you're working and being like, would this make sense in another spot? Like actually in the action and not just looking at it from an aesthetic point of view when you're putting things out. So we definitely have moved some things around. But then, as I shared, a lot of times you'll have where you will grow in some of the things that you're doing, I hope, on your homestead journey. And so you're gonna find that you kind of outgrow areas of the kitchen. So I had shared a video with you guys from years back when I was organizing and doing our herbal cabinet, and it fit in nice one little easy section of our cupboard next to the kitchen sink. But now it has greatly evolved. We use way more herbs than we used to back then, as well as tinctures. And so this is now, there's a little bit of a mixture, and that's totally fine too. What is working for you? So here I keep our dried beans and popcorn. And then everything else is herbs. So I've got some different tinctures that are going here. I've got some of my dried herbs. Obviously these are all dried herbs as well. And then I've got here is calendula, which I need to get into making some oil and infusing, haven't done yet. But really the majority of this is our herb cabinet. And so there's no way that this could fit into one cupboard anymore. So it's totally fine. And I hope that you are growing and expanding. We're gonna be doing an efficient kitchen live class, so that I hope that you can join that for us. It's gonna be this February. You can look at the link beneath this video description and you can sign up and register to join that. And that we're gonna be talking a little bit more about your flow of your pantry and actually cooking and how you organize your week and for your meal prepping and all of that. But I thought I would just share with you the kitchen and also a homestead kitchen. Sometimes you are going to be prioritizing other things rather than the kitchen. So I'm just giving you a real look at our kitchen today. This morning, I actually had to go down first thing this morning before the sun was even all the way up and meet the trimmers. We had the cattle were getting their feet trimmed. My husband was at his day job today, so that fell on me. So I knew I was going to be filming today, and in a perfect world, I would have gotten my little clutter of mess here, which is where things tend to come. A lot of this I do use when I'm making coffee. No, I'm not putting marinated artichoke hearts actually in my coffee. That just happened to get stuck there, but I've got some of my different supplements and whatnot. And I was like, oh, we're gonna do a kitchen video. Like I really need to get that cleaned up. But meeting the trimmers was a little bit more important than getting the cows done. So this is a real life look at kitchen in kind of its normal state of whatnot. Mullein tincture, my daughter's been battling some respiratory stuff, so I've got that set out for her. So if your kitchen looks like this and it's not picture perfect, know that you're totally normal and that organizing and looking for efficiencies and flows in your kitchen, it's something that's going to be ongoing. It's never a once and done thing, and that is totally fine.